So today I'm gonna just briefly cover a few topics. So I'm gonna be talking about a skilled speaker and some of their famous speeches and just the significance of that speech. And the person I'm gonna be talking about is Abraham Lincoln, and more specifically his Gettysburg Address. So before I tell you about the actual Gettysburg Address, I just want to let you know a little bit about Abraham Lincoln himself, so we can understand the context of this speech and just a little bit of background information. So Abraham Lincoln was born on February 12th, 1809, around Hodgenville, Kentucky. His mother died just 9 years after he was born in 1818. And just 10 years after his mother's death, his sister Sarah died while trying to give birth in 1828. So he had a few deaths growing up in his family, significant deaths. His family later moved to Illinois, fearing a sickness outbreak. And that sickness outbreak that they were fearing was actually the same sickness that had killed his mother, which was known as milk sickness. So fearing that would have an outbreak in Kentucky, they moved to Illinois. And later in life, he married Mary Todd in 1842 in Springfield, Illinois. He had 4 kids, but only one lived till maturity. So 3 of them died before they could even pass the age of like 20. So Lincoln had what was called melancholy at that time, which is currently known as depression, but he snapped out of it probably because he was too busy to even be depressed. In terms of his professional endeavors, he was a lawyer and a statesman, but he's most famous for being the 16th president of the United States. And he served as the 16th president from 1861 to 1865. And he's one of the most popular US presidents of all time. Sadly, his life ended the year his term ended in 1865 when he was shot by John Wilkes Booth by attending a play. Before he had died, he had led the country through civil war and ended up abolishing slavery, which was no easy feat. His Gettysburg Address, which I'll be talking about soon, appealed to the sentiments of the people and was delivered just a few months after the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. Next, let me read to you the actual Gettysburg Address, word for word. It's about 3 paragraphs, so we can understand and break down what its significance. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come here to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far beyond our poor power to add or detract. The world will little know nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave their last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. Abraham Lincoln. So that was the actual Gettysburg Address, which he had delivered shortly after the Gettysburg Battle, sorry. And it was short but powerful. But why is it so significant? Like, why is it one of the most famous speeches in American history? And why do we still remember it today? Well, I think that the main reason why it was so famous is a few things. One, it talked about the foolishness of the war and how the dead soldiers didn't die for nothing, And it talked about how the responsibility was passed down to the living. So it didn't just honor the dead, it actually said that there was still a task left to do. So Lincoln talked about how in the Declaration of Independence, it said that all men were created equal, but they were fighting about the verity of that same statement over 80 years later. The Civil War was a war over one of the basic causes of the Revolutionary War, which had happened long before. The Revolutionary War was the war in which America fought to gain their independence from Great Britain. And one of the founding principles was that the colonists felt like they weren't being treated equally by the British. Thus, in the Declaration of Independence, they wrote all men are created equally. But the Civil War, which is happening decades later, is a war over basically the same thing. All men are created equal. So he addressed that. He also noted that whatever they said here may be forgotten, but the actions of the fallen and the cause they had worked for would never be. I mean, obviously, we know that what he said here is not forgotten. That's why I'm reciting it right now. But the actions would never, ever be forgotten. And finally, he stated that the work of the soldiers that had died was unfinished and was not in vain. They had worked for a noble cause, and that it was the people who were alive's job to complete their cause. So he's not just saying, he's not just giving a speech to be like, oh, let's honor the dead. He's saying, yeah, they died, but we still have a job to do. Yes, I understand that they died, but we still have to address the cause that they worked for and make sure that they didn't die in vain. So those are just a few reasons why I think the Gettysburg Address is so significant and famous and just talked about all the time. So I hope that today I was able to spread some knowledge, and hopefully y'all enjoyed it, and have a great rest of the evening.